Comic Book Savant Extra, Episode 4. Welcome back to another episode of Comic Book Savant Extra. This is the fourth episode that I've done, that I've put out in this new series. And again, if you're unfamiliar with what I do with Comic Book Savant Extra, it's basically smaller size episodes that I kind of put out in between the main episodes when I have something that I want to talk about, or do a little bit more personal side of things, to showing you some of the things that I'm personally into that's not a main topic that I would cover on the main podcast. This episode, I'm going to be doing just a single comic review. I've had this comic that was sent to me a little while ago from the writer, Mr. B.J. Mendelsohn was kind enough to send me a preview copy of his comic, Vengeance, Nevada. It's an independent comic that you can buy digitally, and I'll have links to everything in the show notes. So if you go to comicbooksavant.com and you look at the show notes for this episode, I'll have links to everything there. But you can buy it digitally through Comixology. I found the comic there, but he was nice enough to send me a PDF copy of his first issue. And just to give you a rundown of the comic, again, it's Vengeance, Nevada. It's being published by St. Martin's Press. It's, again, written by B.J. Mendelsohn. The artwork is done by, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Petor Kablarski. I hope I pronounced that correctly, and if I messed that up, I do apologize, Peter. And the lettering's done by Peter as well. Again, this is just the first issue of what he hopes to be an ongoing series. I really enjoyed this first issue. The artwork is very strong throughout the issue. The writing is strong as well. BJ does a good job setting up the characters in the world, extremely well. The comic book, as far as with the artwork and the writing, flows very nicely together. The only issue that I had, and it runs into a bigger problem I had with the book individually, is, a lot of times, especially with the first issue of any book, doesn't matter if it's independent or ongoing book, is that I felt like we were kind of dropped in the middle of the story, and I felt like the concept is awesome that BJ's setting up, but just as the narrative carried through the book, it got a little confusing, because you're seeing visually, you see one of the main characters like talking to some of her coworkers, and they're asking her personal questions, and what you're seeing a totally other thing that's non-related to it. So it makes it a little bit hard to follow, because one of the characters are being spoken about is being shown in a totally different light, and I kind of get it. Maybe that character's living like a secretive life from, his wife, a la kind of True Lies, but it makes it hard to follow as the reader being dropped in, and it does some things where it jumps around in time, which is hard for a first issue, which I can imagine is even harder as trying to get an independent book off the ground. You don't have the luxury of having a first issue that is just like a lot of talking but no action in it. But again, the writing's done well, but again, it suffers from, it's trying to do a lot in one issue, and I feel like we needed a little bit more like of a prologue to kind of set the world up a little bit more, because we're dropped in and we're using a lot of popular plot devices that we see in different comics and shows, and everything nowadays is kind of thrown at you all at once. You kind of have the time jump situation where you're jumping around at different times. You're getting some backstory, but with the time jumpage and the different visuals you're getting, and then one character, I don't know if it was supposed to be the same character, our main character in the book, or not, or it just happens the character looks similar, but they looked similar, and it confused me on, in these scenes that I'm seeing, is it the same character that I'm seeing that's talking in whatever time period it was with her coworkers? It looked like it was, but I wasn't 100% sure, and it was never fully made clear. So it made it a little bit as for confusing read going into the first episode, or the first issue, excuse me, I said episode, the first issue of the comic, which is kind of disheartening because, me, if you've listened to the podcast any amount of time, I always have an issue with that, try to establish the world best as possible. But I do understand, meeting and talking to tons of, independent, creators that, it's hard with independent book, especially because you're trying to, garner the, as much interest and to sell as many comics as possible with your first issue, because you might not, especially if you're self-publishing or if you're with a very small publisher, if you don't hit your numbers, you can't get can't get a second or a third or complete the larger story that you want to convey in your series. So I feel like the cohesion with the overall storytelling, the bits and pieces that we got were really good. Again, the writing and artwork definitely complement one another. It's just set for that sticking point that they're kind of saddled with the burden of trying to do too much in one issue to try to hook readers in. I think the concept is definitely there. BJ definitely does a good job setting up the concept of this world. I'm curious to know more about it. I'm just a little confused how it all ties together at this point. It comes off a little convoluted. And I think for most new readers, they're going to be a little bit more confused from this first issue. I feel like you can, as the story goes on, if it got a second or at least a third issue, I think it would start to make a little bit more sense. But the story has good bones. It has great artwork for sure. So, you pick up some independent books, you might not get the best quality. This is a quality book through and through. I think based on this first issue, if I just had to make a decision based alone off of if I purchased this book, I don't know how inclined I would be to pick up the next issue of it, just based on I was left with more questions than answers at the end of the first issue. I think that, I sway more towards I would be potentially willing to pick it up based on I'm curious about the characters. I was pulled in enough about the characters to want to figure out more of what's going on, because it seems like it's a lot of, like I said, a lot of interesting concepts. I would want to at least see in the next issue if they were brought to, a lot of things were cleared up more and kind of got back on focus. I think if once you got over that hurdle, maybe if you could do it in a second, no more than a third issue, that this could really be a good series. Again, sci-fi aspects of it, some not supernatural, but like magic type elements involved with it. So it's a lot of all the different things that I like to it. And like I said, the action was really written well and portrayed well on the page. But again, it's tough. I totally understand with it being tough with a first issue of a series and an independent book as well. You have even less time to kind of just have an issue with just talking heads and nothing else. You have so much pressure to try to convey so much in that one issue. So I would have to, if I give this a rating, I would give it a wait for the trade or 6 out of 10, 6 to 6.5 out of 10. Like I said, the concept is really good, and it was a quality book as far as the writing and the artwork, which is definitely a strong point because you don't always get that. And I think those are the stronger points of the book. So I would, like I said, 6.5 maximum on this first issue. BJ, I do appreciate, you sending me out, an issue to review of the comic. I hope this helps. If you guys are definitely interested, this is worth checking out at least for this first issue. I haven't had any more contact with BJ to see if a second issue is available. I hope, again, it is, because I'd love seeing, different things hit the market, and seeing, people try to break into the comic industry, I think is an important thing. We need different points of views. So when we get things like this, we need to go out and support it so we can get more of it. We need even more diversity in comics that are outside of the major companies, because it seems like more and more companies now, the comics are having less meaning as comics themselves, and more they're testing grounds or storyboards for the next movie. So it's good to see an original idea kind of put to paper, and it's something different than we get from what we are seeing in mainstream comics right now. So again, I appreciate it. That's all I have for you guys for this episode of Comic Book Savant Extra. As always, check out the website, www.comicbooksavant.com. Also, definitely check out the YouTube page if you haven't already. It's www.youtube.com/Comic Book Savant. Definitely subscribe if you haven't already. And you can also follow me on social media at Comic Book Savant on Twitter as well as on Instagram. And as always, if you're unfamiliar with the Facebook group, it's also a Facebook group and page that I have all the things listed on the website as well. So if you forget any of the web addresses, I have links to all the social media, the YouTube channel, as well as the Facebook page and the Facebook group. We have a Facebook group as well. So all the links are over at comicbooksavant.com. Check it out if you have a chance. And I will see you guys later this week with another episode of Comic Book Savant. And I will see you then. You guys take care.